Okay, hello everybody. I am Charles Denodia. This is my lovely girlfriend, Hannah Zahner. She has taken a break. What were your plans for tonight? You were going to watch an episode of Scandal and do some sociology homework. She has generously agreed to help me with this lesson for today. We are going to be going over a KWL chart. Hannah has never done a KWL chart before, so this will be an actual learning experience for her. If you have seen my last lesson, which some of you have, we did an introduction to modeling and geometry, and we're going to kind of continue off of that. Last time we did an anticipation guide that dealt with some basics of geometry and some geometrical concepts, and the anticipation guide. And now we're going to do a KWL chart to kind of extend that into the next section, which is the actual modeling prospects that we want. So first off, I'll explain what a KWL chart is, since some of the class hasn't seen it. A KWL chart, you've got a copy of it there, is basically a way to organize our thoughts and to track our progress. So you see there in that first column, we can write down what we know, and that's to kind of group together our thoughts and realize before we start learning what we already know about our topic. So that's going to be kind of our baseline, what we're building off of as we move into this geometry lesson. The next section is the what I want to know section, and that's going to be our goals for this whole lesson. So what do you want to learn? And some of those goals I'm going to give you, but some of them I want you to make yourself, and some of them I want you to kind of push your own learning with. And then at the end, the last section there, the L section, will be the learned section, what I learned, and then that'll be a good way to come back together and check to see if we've met our goals and see if we've learned what we wanted to learn. So now that we've explained that, let's go ahead and start it. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention before is we're going to actually use this KWL chart before we do a short, well, it's actually a collection of readings. It's 3 short little blurbs readings that are kind of going to give us an idea of how to actually do some basic modeling. So for those of you who don't remember what modeling is that we talked about last class, it's basically taking the modeling that we're talking about right now. There's many different forms of modeling, but basically what we're going to do, what we want to do is be able to take an object, so this is kind of a simple object, a cylinder, and use basic shapes that we know about it. So we know that circle, circle, and we know how to find different areas and circumferences of circles, and find surface areas and volumes for 3D figures. So that's kind of our goal for this lesson. We're going to be doing these 3 little short readings that are going to help us get there, and the KWL chart is going to be kind of our tool to help guide us through. So in that first K section, you're going to write down some things. We can do it together as a class. You won't have to do it individually. But what are some things that you remember from the last lesson, some things that you know?
Pizza is better eaten when it's folded.
Okay, so that's a good thing that you remember.
Yeah.
But what are some, remember towards the end of the class we talked about the modeling
How
things?
you can just take the different shaped surface areas and then add them together and you get the total surface area.
Right, there you go.
You find the little shapes and the big shapes.
Yep. So go ahead and write that down. So we can use, how would you phrase that in one sentence?
We can use what we already know to help us.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's good. About geometry, right?
Yeah.
So for the whole class, just in case anyone couldn't hear her, we're going to use what we already know about geometrical shapes in 2D to project into 3D and find surface areas and volumes. Now, do you remember anything else about some of the more complex shapes that we talked about? Like we had a vacuum that we looked at.
Yeah. I remember the vacuum. I don't quite remember.
Okay, that's okay. It was a little while ago.
So
So when we have big I should have pulled it out, but that's all right. For bigger complex shapes, right? Like this chair. Here's a perfect example, right? This chair, it's got different shapes in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got cylinders, we've got rectangles. Now, if we wanted to find the surface area or volume of the whole thing, we could find the individual parts and add that together,
And
right?
add it together, yeah.
So maybe for something that we already know, we could write, we can use composites of the shapes that we already know to find larger shapes.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and write that down.
Yeah.
All right. And then how about the W section? So things that we want to know. If our end goal here is to find shapes like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things, some building blocks that we might need to know to get here from, say, circles and squares in the 2 dimensions?
The 3-dimensional shapes.
Right, so for example for this,
It's a cylinder.
right, so it might be helpful to know how to find the surface area of a cylinder,
Yeah.
right? If we had a formula
Like
for
the
that,
formulas we
yeah.
want to know.
or if we wanted a box, it might be helpful for that. Or if you remember we looked at last time, we looked at a sphere, that might be a helpful formula to know, right?
Yeah.
So maybe under the W category, we can write down some of the formulas we want to know. All right. And then is there anything, let's have you come up with one. What's one thing that you want to know by the end of this?
I would like to know the best way. I would like to know.
Keeping in mind that our end goal is to more complex shapes, right?
Yeah, I would like to know. I would like to try and figure out the surface area of like a famous building or a famous monument. I
Okay.
would like to know how to do that.
All
Like
right.
the Great Pyramids, it'd be cool to know the surface area of the
That's
pyramids.
absolutely something we can do.
Okay.
So go ahead and write that down. All right. So now, ideally, if this was a class setting, we'd get more people involved, and we'd have. Ooh, careful there. Get more people involved, and we'd have some more responses, and we'd get some more ideas on the table. But for a small class setting, this is an appropriate amount to talk about it. I basically got them, her, thinking about all the things I want her to think about, and I've got her kind of guided in a specific direction I want to guide her in. So now we're going to move into the reading, and hopefully by the end of the reading we'll have addressed those, and we're going to come back at the end of the reading and look at the L section and see if we've learned what we want to. Actually, I just remembered. One thing that I wanted to add in as kind of a goal was by the end of the class, we're going to know that's kind of not showing up on camera, the surface area and volume of this hanger. I figured this was kind of a fun, complex shape that pretty much everyone sees. So it would be kind of cool to use this to do an example.
Cool.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll get back to you guys after Hannah finishes the reading.
Hi. I have a question.
Yeah.
I was looking through the reading, and I was just wondering what that symbol next to the 2 is.
Right there?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, like right there.
Yeah, so that's the symbol for pi.
Okay.
This is actually this reading. So different sources use different symbols. That's the capital Greek letter pi. We're only ever going to use the lowercase symbol.
Okay.
but sometimes you might see that.
Does it mean a different number than normal pi,
No,
or is it the same thing?
It's the same thing. It's just
Same.
I know that's a little confusing. I'm sorry, but
It's totally fine.
it's the same thing. It's just his capital and lowercase, and for whatever reason, this article decided to use the capital.
So this is the same as this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the other readings, they're going to use the lowercase, and that's what we're going to use. So that's going to be our consistent notation is the lowercase.
Okay.
Pi.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, it does talk about pyramids in here, so I
Yeah.
can like learn how to do pyramids.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Remember that for the L section of the
Yeah,
chart.
I'll like star it.
Okay, so now we finished the readings. They're really short readings. The main focus of the literacy here is not the reading section. We're kind of just using that as a tool to do the KWL chart with. So the KWL chart is the main literacy focus of this lesson. So that being said, what are some things that you think now that you've done the reading that you could write in your L section? Just right now. We'll address it later when everything's over, but from the reading,
I
what do you think you
learned.
put in your L section?
I learned the formula for a couple different shapes.
Right.
Which was an objective we wanted to learn.
And those are probably going to be pretty useful, right? Because the next
Yeah.
thing we're going to do is we're going to jump right into it and we're going to start finding it for some basic shapes.
So having the formula is cool because you can just plug the numbers in and then you got the answer. I also learned. Dropping my pen. I also learned. I learned the different abbreviations you can use and the different symbols you can use.
Okay.
So I learned like R is radius and H is height and B is
That's
base.
actually, I personally wouldn't have thought of that, but that's actually a really good thing to write down. So go ahead and write that down in your L section. It's actually like really good. Okay, anything else? What about your personal goal with the
Yeah, I
pyramids?
definitely learned how to do that. I could definitely, if I Googled like the actual base and height of the pyramids, or I went there and I like got a measuring tape and I like measured it, I could 100% figure out.
Careful, I might have signed that for homework.
Like that would be awesome. Let's go to Cairo.
All right, so now we're going to jump into the math portion of the lesson.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the timing of this lesson goes. Like, I'm not sure how long I've spent so far video-wise. So this might be really cut down, or it might not be super cut down. If it is super cut down, I apologize. But we're going to try and fit it all into 10 minutes this